Guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying safe. I hope everything's good wherever you are. I hope you guys are well. Happy holidays to everyone. I hope all you guys are keeping well, staying safe. Everything's well wherever you are. Um, I'm planning on doing a live stream later. Hopefully talking about various stuff, fighters of the year and upsets of the year and all of that stuff, and we can chat about prospect and who we are going to be looking out for next year and all of that good stuff. But in this video, I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about obviously fighter of the year. I want to talk about upset of the year. Give you my opinions. There's obviously been some fighters that deserve mentioning. Taylor managed to become undisputed. Alexander Usyk did something that a lot of people didn't think he could do. He upset Anthony Joshua. He beat a guy that a lot of people thought he couldn't. Everyone was saying he's too small. He's come up from cruiserweight. He hasn't looked too good. And he managed to beat Anthony Joshua and become a unified heavyweight champion of the world, which, in the history of the sport hasn't happened much. Happened a lot. I think Evander Holyfield is the only one that, is unified. Well, he was undisputed, I believe, Evander Holyfield, which obviously Alexander Usyk hasn't done. He'd have to beat Fury to do that. But yeah, it's not happened much in the history where a guy from cruiserweight has come on and held more than one belt. There's been guys like David Haye. Roy Jones has, won a heavyweight world title, but to win, unify, and beat a top champion, Joshua was he wasn't the best champion because for me, Fury was the best. But still, to beat Anthony Joshua, where, he was a big, strong guy, and the way Alexander Usyk beat him, it was the performance that was impressive. It was an incredible performance by Alexander Usyk. Taylor, although he had one fight against Ramirez, and obviously that his win over Ramirez was nowhere near as impressive as Alexander Usyk's win against Joshua. And he only had one fight, Taylor, this year. So Taylor was good. Taylor deserves. I wouldn't say he was the fighter of the year. I think Alexander Usyk is definitely up there. But I think the fighter of the year, with unquestionably, I think is one guy, and he's the guy that cleaned out a division in 10 months. Having a span, and I'd like to include his Callum Smith fight in December. In 10 months, he cleaned out a whole division, and he's the Mexican superstar Saul Canelo Alvarez, who literally cleaned out a division in 10 months. And I know that his first fight in the division to become a champion against Callum Smith was last year in December. But, I'd like to include that in 10 months, he's cleaned out a division. That's something that doesn't happen in boxing. That's something that, a lot of fighters don't do. Canelo really did it easily as well. Like if you look at Josh Taylor's run, Josh Taylor had a lot of trouble. A lot of people thought he struggled against Prograis, and, his fights weren't easy. Well, Canelo just dominated. He just dominated to become undisputed champion that easily. And then, to be honest, the fighters were pretty decent. Billy Joe's a good fighter. Caleb Plant's a good fighter. Callum Smith's a good fighter. And he totally dominated all three. They weren't even that hard for him. They weren't even that difficult for him. And those are three undefeated champions. People talk about, other fighters fighting undefeated champions. Canelo fought three undefeated champions, and he dominated. He won easy. He took him apart, really. He comfortably stopped two of them, and one of them he battered him and won probably every round. So Canelo was so dominant in his way to... Let's not forget he fought Avni Yildirim, which was a kind of a, gimme, really. It was an easy fight for Canelo, but he dismantled him as well in, a couple of rounds. So Canelo Alvarez had a very, very dominant year, and I can't really think of any fighter that's had a better year than Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez has been the man in this year. And to be honest with you, I won't be surprised if he's the man of next coming years, because if I'm truly honest with you, and I'm going to do a separate video about this, Canelo might do the same in their light heavyweight division. I don't think his light heavyweight division will be as dominant, because I think the fighters are better. I think the fighters are more dangerous. And obviously now Canelo's playing with fire, in the sense moving up and fighting bigger guys. And also for me, those bigger guys are a lot more skilled than the guys that he faced at 168. Bivol and Beterbiev especially would beat any of the guys that he beat at 168. So for me, I think Canelo's going to have it a lot harder at 175, but I still fancy him to become undisputed at that weight if he wants to go there and do that. So yeah, without question, Canelo Alvarez, what a man, what a fighter. We talk a lot about Canelo, but he deserves utmost respect. He's the best in the world right now. I think you've got to give him respect. You've got to give him credit for what he's done in the game. A lot of people love to criticize Canelo and say, oh, well, he went through the weakest division. I don't see other guys doing that, though. I don't see other guys. There's other weak divisions out there that, other guys are not doing the same. Canelo's doing something. He's a trendsetter for me. Clean out a division in 10 months. And what people say, that was a weak division. They were 3 undefeated world champions that he took out quite comfortably. Those same 3 undefeated champions would give other fighters hard fights. They won't be easy fights. But Canelo's so great and so good that he just cleaned out a division. And without question, unless you guys can think of a fighter of the year that you think deserves it more than Canelo, the only one that I can think of is Usyk. Because for me, Usyk's win is better than any win that Canelo had, without question, because Usyk was an underdog in that fight. Canelo was a massive favorite to beat all of the guys that he fought. But Usyk, and here's the thing about the Usyk fight with Joshua. Usyk, I always thought Usyk would beat Joshua, but it's the fact that most of the boxing fans thought he was too small. And so I don't think that was an upset, personally. I know that according to bookies and stuff, it was an upset. But for me, that wasn't really that big an upset. The reason why it was a big upset is because, firstly, a lot of people knew Joshua, and Joshua was this big, strong guy that knocks everyone out. And Usyk would be too small, and as soon as Joshua hit him, Usyk would fall over. But that wasn't the case. I always knew Usyk would be a problem for Joshua. I always knew that. I can't see that being an easy fight. I just couldn't see how Joshua would win that fight the way people were saying he would. And I always said from the start that I think Anthony Joshua would lose that fight. And that's what basically happened. Joshua ended up getting beat quite soundly in that fight, which for me was... I predicted that. I predicted Usyk to win that fight, and he did quite comfortably. But nevertheless, the performance from Usyk and the fact that he went up and beat a unified heavyweight champion, that deserves some recognition. Because that is some win. And bearing in mind, I know it wasn't this year, but Usyk was an undisputed cruiserweight champion, which is impressive in its own way. But for him to win that fight against Anthony Joshua the way he did and how dominant he was in that fight, and he almost stopped Joshua in the last round as well, which was very impressive for me because a lot of people said he hasn't got any power, which obviously was rubbish because, he hurt Joshua several times in that fight where Joshua, got hit with shots and Joshua looked in trouble. So Usyk is a phenomenon without question. His win against Joshua was definitely deserved some recognition and he's up there. But I think undoubtedly Canelo Alvarez, what he did and the body of work in 2021, I think he is without question the fighter of the year. And I don't think really anyone can dispute that. I think you have to give Canelo credit. You have to say that, his body of work was better than anybody else's. Yeah, single win, you'd probably say Usyk is better than was better than Canelo. But nevertheless, you have to go off the resume, the body of work, and for a champion or for a guy to clean out a division in 10 months. I don't really think, has that been done before? To clean out a division in 10 months in the modern era, in a 4-belt era, has anyone done that? No. So Canelo, without question, is this fighter of the year. And personally, if he carries on in this form, he'll easily, like for me, 2010, probably the fighter of the decade was Manny Pacquiao. The fighter of the decade was probably Mayweather for 2020. Who knows? Although Mayweather only fought half, maybe he fought till 2016, I think, or 15 or whatever he did. But his body of work was brilliant. 2020 to 2030, Canelo Alvarez, if he carries on the way he is, I don't think Canelo will be around in 2030 because he'd be about 40 years of age almost. So I don't think Canelo will be around then. But I do think I do think Canelo Alvarez has a good run. If he has another good 6, 7 years, which I think he will do, I think he will definitely be the fighter of the decade. Unfortunately, in the last 20 years, Mayweather and Pacquiao have kind of dominated that kind of fighter of the decade thing. Even though Canelo had, he definitely he had a case for being fighter of the decade from 2010 to 2020, but I think Mayweather and Pacquiao were just a bit better at that point. Whereas I do think this decade, I think without question, with the way Canelo started it, with being undisputed, I think if he carries on for another 4 or 5 years and dominates and goes on to become undisputed, I reckon if he becomes undisputed in the next 2 years, for example, at 175, for me, that's already fighter of the decade. I don't think there's anyone that in 2 or 3 years he could be fighter of the decade, because I don't think anyone's going to be able to surpass that. Like, how can you surpass a fighter who's been undisputed? Maybe Terence Crawford, but even Terence Crawford, he became undisputed not in this decade. It was last decade. So, I don't think anyone is going to be able to beat Canelo Alvarez. If Canelo Alvarez becomes undisputed at 175, wins the title at cruiserweight, for me, that's already in the space of 2, 3 years of this decade, unless someone does something dramatic, in the next 10 years, which is going to be very hard to do. I think Alvarez already wins fighter of the decade. I can't see anybody doing anything greater than what Canelo's done in the first couple of years of the decade, of this 2020, 2030. And that just shows what level Canelo is operating at. That just shows how great Canelo Alvarez is. And that's why when people give Canelo stick and say he's a ducker and saying he's doing this, that, and the other, I find it hilarious, because like I said, who else is doing it like him in the game right now? Nobody. So, yeah. Also, Canelo's done something, and I know that was this decade, something that Mayweather and Pacquiao never did. They never became undisputed. They were never undisputed. They never held 4 belts in a division. So, again, I do think that the culture's changed. I do think there's more emphasis on being undisputed now. So we are going to see more undisputed champions than what we saw in the past, because back when Mayweather and Pacquiao, I don't think being undisputed was that big. Like, nobody said, "Oh, I got to be undisputed. I got to hold 4 belts." There wasn't really that much emphasis put on it back then than it is now. That's why there were so few undisputed back then, because it was never seen as that big a thing. Whereas now, since a few fighters have become undisputed, like Terence Crawford, like, it's become kind of an in thing, and I can see there's going to be a lot more undisputed champions moving forward. I can see a lot. Sometimes the politics of boxing can get in the way and stop that from happening. But I do feel that a lot more fighters are seeing a lot more. There's more emphasis put on it. I feel like there's more recognition getting from becoming undisputed. So I do see there'll be more fighters becoming undisputed. In terms of the upset of the year, for me, there's one. And I have to go on. And to be honest, in the future, this might not be viewed as such a bigger upset, depending on what Kambosos goes on to do. But I think definitely Kambosos Lopez was I think how Lopez was being hyped after the Lomachenko win, and people were talking about him, the way he was talking about himself. Everybody kind of brought into the hype that this guy is the next superstar in boxing. And unfortunately, he kind of believed in his hype a little bit. And, they got found wanting against Kambosos. And listen, maybe Lopez is better than that. We now know that he had a condition going into that fight and stuff. He has, done an interview since, and, he's been more humble. Hopefully Teofimo Lopez can come back from that. I hope he's not one of those fighters where, where he's lost a fight and his confidence is completely shattered. We saw that with Nazim Hamed. Guys that believe in themselves a lot, they find it very difficult when they take a loss. Their confidence gets shattered, and they're sometimes never the same fighters. Hopefully that doesn't happen with Teofimo Lopez. I think he's a good fighter. I do. But I do think that Lomachenko win flattered him a little bit. And what I mean by that is, I think he's a good fighter. Without question, Lomachenko is a very good fighter. Teofimo Lopez is a very good fighter. But I think sometimes you win a fight that you weren't expected to win, and that flatters you a little bit. Like, some people are saying the same with Ugas beating Manny Pacquiao, that's flattered him a little bit, because Manny Pacquiao wasn't the same Manny Pacquiao that he was in his prime. I do think Ugas is a very good fighter, and I think Ugas proved that before against Sean Porter, because I had him beating Sean Porter. So I think that fight, I feel that fight against Lomachenko flattered Lopez, and we all as boxing fans started making Lopez out to be something he wasn't, in the sense that he's a good fighter, maybe a great fighter, and maybe in the future he'll prove that he's a great fighter. But because you beat one guy, that doesn't mean you're the best things. Like, he beat Comey and he beat Nakatani, but at the end of the day, he hasn't really beaten a lot of guys on Lomachenko's level where we can say, well, he was a proven guy. He had one win at elite level against Lomachenko, and we all started saying this guy's the best, that's not how boxing works. I think we needed to give him more time. We needed him to have more of a body of work. And I personally think hopefully Lopez can come back. I don't know what he's going to do in terms of weight. Is he going to stay at 135? He has said he's going to move to 140. Let's see how Teofimo bounces back from this. Because it was a defeat nonetheless, but let's see how he comes back from it. I totally think he'll come back from it. I do. I think he's a very good fighter. I think he's definitely got skills. He's got ability, and he will bounce back without question. I feel like fans, they hype a guy up when he wins a fight. They flatter him, and then when a fighter loses, like Teofimo, he's a bum. He was overhyped. He was overrated. We gave him too much credit for beating Lomachenko without him proving more to us. But now I feel like people are giving him too much stick and making him out to be he's rubbish and he's this. No, he's not. He's a good fighter. He's a quality fighter. It's just that he got beat. That can happen. And now people are undervaluing him as a fighter. And that's just boxing fans, very reactionary. I've said this before. Boxing fans are very reactionary. They make someone a superstar overnight and they drop someone as a bum. It's just reactionary. That's just boxing fans for you. But that for me was the upset of the year. What else? Fight of the year for me is definitely Fury Wilder. What a spectacle. What a fight. Two warriors. Deontay Wilder gets a lot of stick, but wow, what a warrior that man is. What a hard and tough man that guy is. That guy, that fight was brilliant. Fury, Wilder starting off with jabbing to the body. I actually watched that fight again today. Wilder started off very well, jabbing to the body. Looked like he had a game plan, jabbing a lot, targeting Fury's body. Then in the second round, Fury got into the fight a little bit more, landed a few more shots. In the third round, Fury took initiative and dropped Wilder. And then in the fourth round, we didn't see it coming. Wilder ended up hurting Fury, hitting him hard, dropping him. And it looked like, and then dropped him for a second time. And it looked like, whoa, there's a massive upset on the cards. Fury recovered, managed to, get hold of the fight, swing the momentum back in his favor, and then eventually hit Wilder. And Wilder was fatigued and knocked Wilder out in the 11th, I believe. What a fight that was. And you know what? For me, those two guys are made for each other. I would love to see them fight again in the future. Not now, but in the future, maybe down the road in a couple years' time, maybe them two could fight again, because them two are made for each other. Them two, whenever they fight, like Fury might always come out on top. But you know what? One thing you got to give Wilder credit. He was very close to beating Fury in 2 of those 3 fights. Very close. He was seconds away. And sometimes that's the margin. That's the margin that's the margin at elite level sport. Just seconds. He was seconds away from beating Tyson Fury in the first fight and the third fight. Fury, I thought when he knocked Fury down the second time, Fury might be out, but Fury recovers really well. He's a warrior. You see, the problem is what Wilder has. Wilder's a warrior, and he's got so much heart, and he's such a tough man, and he's got a lot of heart. But the problem is, Wilder has another guy at the opposite corner who has the same kind of heart, who has the same kind of desire, who is the same warrior as him, but he's more skilled than him. And that's the difference between the two. Fury's just a bit more versatile, a bit better. He's much better than Wilder from a technical point of view. Hence why he'll come out on top, because if Fury didn't have the same heart, he wasn't the same warrior Wilder was, Wilder probably beats him, even though Fury's more technically skilled. But because Fury has the same stuff on the inside that Wilder has, and he's more skilled than Wilder, the chances of him beating Wilder he's going to beat Wilder more often than not, or beat Wilder all the time, because he's a warrior just like Wilder is, but he's also a technically more superior fighter. So he's probably always going to come out on top against Wilder. Even though, again, Wilder being so much smaller, being technically not as good as Fury, you know, giving up so much weight, you know, Fury having the height, reach, weight, everything. But yet Wilder still almost beat him in 2 of those 3 fights, which tells you that Wilder, although people talk about him being a one-trick pony, not that great, Wilder's a great fighter as well. He's a great fighter, but boxing fans are funny. You know, they are funny. But yeah, Wilder for me is a great fighter. Fury's a great fighter. Let's see how Joshua comes back from the defeat against Usyk. Can he come back? It's going to be very tough. But yeah, guys, that's my breakdown of a lot of things. You know, prospect of the year, maybe Jaron Boots Ennis. Promoter of the year, probably Eddie Hearn. You know, but we'll talk about this hopefully in the live stream. Leave your thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think. And guys, remember to please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.